Okay, so the recording has started. So as I say, you're very, very welcome to the first session. We have several different audiences on the call this morning and on our registered program. We have people who are career salespeople. We have people who manage career salespeople. We have coaches, consultants, trainers, and developers who help develop sales skills. And my suggestion throughout is going to be that you participate, how would I put it, in the first person. So participate as if you're a salesperson. So whether you're a sales manager, a salesperson, an interested coach, consultant, trainer, party, etc., the way to get the most out of this program will be to inhabit the role of a salesperson and to take part in all of the exercises that we suggest. So with that said, I want to welcome the folks who only are seeing this first session on recording only. Because as I mentioned earlier, we were a little bit late getting the invitations out. So some of you only got them in the last day or two and are joining the first session from the recording. So you're very, very welcome on that. So let me get rid, just so it's not a distraction. And so I'll get rid of my speaker panel. And I'm going to tell, so let me welcome those folks aboard. So let me start off the presentation. Here we go. So you're on the Mindful and Emotional Intelligence Salesperson program, the first of 4 sessions. So first off, let me start, and with apologies to those of you who have attended sessions that we do before. This is something we always say at the beginning. I mean, there's obviously a choice with a program like this. A lot of folks, myself included, will sometimes tune into sessions like these, and you put them in the background, and with some sort of informational style sessions, that'll work very, very well. You can just let the information flow in the background while you're doing your emails and so on. But given the reality that all of the research shows that the majority of us cannot multitask, the 2% who do improve from multitasking, good luck to them. But the 98% of us, when we try to multitask, all we improve is our ability to be distracted. So if you've made a decision to invest time, energy, and by implication, opportunity, money, if you want to call it that, by being on a program, if you want to get the best from it, I strongly suggest close down other tabs, switch off your phone, and so on and so forth. And we're going to share some great information with you over the next 4 sessions. So this is me. I said in the intro before we started recording that I tell you all the wonderful things I am. You may think that the picture is just there for gratuitous reasons, and it is. I mean, all men are little boys, and we love our gadgets, and I love what we did with this. But there's a very strong message behind this picture that I'm going to allude back to later on. But that's a little bit about myself. And Genos, the organization, I'm not going to bore you with all the deep details. We're around since 2002. We're one of the leading providers of emotional intelligence solutions and assessments. And we've more than 1,500 certified partners worldwide. The way we go to market is through partners who are certified to deliver our assessments and solutions to their clients. Swinburne University is where the company was born. And it was born as a result of a PhD that was done by, or a thesis that was done by Dr. Ben Palmer when he was pursuing his PhD. Since then, the organization has won lots and lots of accolades. I'm not going to bore you with them all. Last 2 years, we've been amongst the top 20 assessment companies in the world, not just the top 20 EI companies, but top 20 assessment companies in the world, according to trainingindustry.com. We are accredited by the ICF for continuing education. We're an ICF business partner. We won the, oh Lord, that's a terrible thing. I've forgotten the name of the medal that we won there, the gold medal for our leadership program last year. And we're blessed by Daniel Goleman's Consortium for Research in Emotional Intelligence in Organizations. Here's why we exist. Our vision, our mission, our purpose is to create workplaces where people want to be, where people come to work mindful and tuned in to the idea that if they show up in a particular way, they make the workplace, and by implication the world, a more pleasant place for everybody to be, themselves included. And this is the purpose that we've worked on for a long, long time. And this program which is the second program we provided as part of a corporate responsibility program, is provided at no cost because this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to seed this idea where people can create workplaces where, as I say, stress is low, motivation and optimism is high. So how does that apply to the world of sales? What does that mean for sales? So let's start off and look in general at the world of sales and the worlds of sales training and so on and so forth globally, and then try and put some context around mindfulness and emotional intelligence in that context. So let me tell you first off, training of salespeople is one of the biggest industries in the whole training and development world. And logically so, because as an old mentor of mine used to say, nothing happens until somebody sells something. We are so dependent upon our sales and marketing people to generate business that we spend a lot of money on training and developing them. And the global sales training market, according to trainingindustry.com, was worth $2.54 billion in 2017. Although if you look at the Harvard Business Review, they refer to it being worth $15 billion. And I guess the truth is somewhere in between there, but I always tend to err on the side of the more conservative number. So sufficient to say that you and I and everybody else who is in business is spending a lot of money on training. In sales forces in general, and this was the best stat that I could come up with, about $1 trillion is spent globally on sales forces. Now that's salaries, bonuses, expenses, training, and so on and so forth. On this side of the world, we're in Ireland, and on this side of the world, $1 trillion is 9 zeros. In the United States, it's 12 zeros. But sufficient to say, it's a lot of money. And most of it is spent on training salespeople to follow processes. So the theory is, and it's a solid theory, by the way, that if you can figure out what are the right steps that successful salespeople go through to generate business with their clients, and if you can codify those or put them into a process, well, then you can train other people to follow that process. And so most of the sales training that you see out there is process-oriented. It's about step by step by step, working through the process of identifying potential clients, reaching out to them, making contact with them, meeting them, establishing their needs, qualifying their ability to do business with you, and so on and so forth. I'm working through that process. And by the way, you might think that I put this up here as a joke. This is actually a selection from a provider, a sales training provider that provides a sales process system that is supported by an online system as well. And this is where most of the investment goes. It goes into developing these processes. And yet, and despite that huge investment, and despite the fact that we spend so much on our salespeople, we still have exactly the same distribution across salespeople of performance as we do across every other role. And research that's been repeated year after year after year for the last 30 years says that in sales roles, like in any other roles, if you have 10 salespeople, well, then 2 of them are going to be bottom performers. 6 of them are going to be average performers. And 2 of them are going to be top performers. So you got all this massive investment, and yet you've still got this disparity where on the same sales team, where people are getting the same basic salary, the same basic opportunities, have the same basic facilities to work with, there can be a difference of as much as 64% between the top performers and the bottom performers, because the results suggest in general that in these sort of positions that the bottom performers sell 32% less than the average performers, and the top performers sell 32% more. So there's a gap of 64%. And for the mathematically minded, I know it's not as simple as just adding them together and getting 64%. In actual fact, the gap is larger. And in fact, do I have it on the next one? Yeah. Daniel Goleman estimated in working with emotional intelligence that the top performing salespeople are 12 times more productive than those at the bottom, and 85% more productive than the average performer. It doesn't matter what the exact number is. The reality is that we have sales forces where people are getting really good training. And by the way, don't get the wrong idea. I am not down on conventional sales training. It's really important. It's really important that people understand the step-by-step process to go through with their products and their services to create the best opportunity to meet the needs of a client and generate business for the organization. That's really, really important. And yet, despite the fact that all of our salespeople are getting the same training, are getting the same investment, are getting the same support, we still have this disparity between the top performers in the middle, between the middle and the bottom. And if you were looking at this in purely financial terms, you'd say something's broken. How can this be? How can it be that I get return on investment on part of this investment and not on the rest of it, the investment I make in training? Well, there must be something missing. Because if you've got a sales force, let's say of 10 people or 100 people, and if 20% of those, broadly speaking, if 20% of those are bottom performers, and only 20% of them are top performers, and the rest are average, and I don't know about you, but average is not what we aspire to. It's not what you aspire to. It's not what our organization aspires to. We all aspire to be top of the line. But if you got that situation where you got that disparity, well, then there has to be something we're missing. There has to be something that is key to success of the people who are on the top rung that is not there to the same extent in the people in the middle, and is certainly not there to the same extent to the people on the bottom. And what a lot of research, and Goleman is kind of the daddy of emotional intelligence, he was kind of the first to identify it, but what a lot of research has said over the last 20 years is it's not technical skill. To be a good salesperson, you have to know how to sell. You have to know how to conduct yourself. You have to understand your products inside out. You have to understand how to sell effectively to clients, to identify their needs and create solutions that are compelling. And all of that is really important. That's what I would call technical skill. That's really critically important. But what he said, and use Goleman's language, is that all of those are threshold skills. They are, if you like, the cost of entry to the market. In other words, you cannot be a great salesperson unless you've been trained as a salesperson. But just having been trained in sales processes and in your product doesn't guarantee success. That gets you into the game. And what he said and what a lot of researchers said is the difference between the top performers and the rest is basically the way they show up, or emotional intelligence. Now, I want to look now over the next few minutes, and I suggested to you that you have a pen and paper ready. Do me a favor. Please make sure that to take part in this exercise. Don't do me a favor and don't just spectate. Actually participate. So grab a pen and paper, and we're going to just go through a quick exercise just to show you why the way you show up, or emotional intelligence as we'll call it from now on, is really critical to everything, but we'll show how it's particularly critical to sales success. So as I say, grab your pen and paper now, and I recognized a few names on the call here, and some of you have been through this exercise with us before, but that doesn't mean you should spectate. Please, again, just to bring that back to the front of your mind, I really strongly suggest that, again, you participate in the exercise. So let's do this. So I want you to think, please, of the best boss you ever worked for. So this is a boss that, you know, when you think, it probably came to mind right now, but somebody that you say, I would have no hesitation working for them again in a heartbeat. All things being equal, I'd have no problem. Now, if you've never had a boss like that, think about an inspiring coworker or mentor, coach, teacher, but ideally, think of somebody in a leadership position, you know, somebody who was influencing, and just write their name or their initials on the top of the paper. And don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to name any names or anything like that. Now, I'm going to read out to you 6 behaviors, and I'm going to ask you to rate the extent to which that great boss demonstrated those behaviors. And the way I'm going to ask you to rate them is by comparing them to other people. So you'll notice there's a key down the bottom there. Let me get my controls out of the way. There's a key down the bottom there that says significantly less than others, about typical, significantly more. So let's imagine that one of the behaviors I'm going to show you, and it's not, by the way, let's imagine that it's tells really funny stories. Well, then, if you were thinking of that best boss, I want you to think of how they compare to everybody else in terms of telling really funny stories. So 5 might be, he's the funniest guy I ever met. He told more funny stories more of the time than anybody I knew. 1 is, he was humor bypassed. He never told any funny stories. He had no humor whatsoever. And a score of 3 would be, yeah, he's about the same as everybody else, about average on that. So I'm going to read out 6 behaviors. I'm going to ask you to rate that best boss on those 6 behaviors. Okay. And with the first one, I'll give you an example, but then after they're very, very obvious. So let's start with this one. Demonstrates awareness of their mood and emotions. Long story short, a number of months ago, I was going into a meeting where there was going to be a little bit of friction. And I was going in with a colleague, we call her MJ. And we knew that there was going to be a little bit of sort of banging heads together. And you know how that is. You know how that can be a little bit tense when you're going into that. And so we went in and we went through all the preliminary pleasantries. How are the kids? Look at that weather. Wasn't the traffic terrible? How have you been since the last time we met you? And all that sort of stuff. And then we started getting to the stage where people across the table started saying things that were just taking little bites. And we're starting to raise the temperature of the meeting. And, we were getting into the crux, the core of the disagreement. And people were starting to say things that were winding us up a little bit. And just 2, 3, 4 minutes into the meeting, MJ excused herself and to the bathroom. And I'm sitting on one side of the table, 3 people sitting on the other side of the table. And it's honestly, it just feels like you're swinging in the wind. So you got 3 people who are taking little bites and who are starting to get a little bit more heated and a little bit wound up. And I'm there, just me. And it was a little bit uncomfortable. And MJ came back a few minutes later, excused herself, and we carried on. Now, afterwards, when we were talking about it, she apologized. She said, I'm sorry to have left you swinging in the wind. But some of the things that people were saying were getting me so upset, getting me so triggered, that I knew that I was going to say something that I wouldn't be able to take back. I was going to say something to make things worse. So I did what my mama told me always to do. I went to the bathroom. I ran some cold water on my wrists. My mother used to tell me count to 10 or take a breath, just to calm down. And then I came back in. Now, when I look at MJ and I score her on the extent to which she demonstrated awareness of her mood and emotions, I score her a 5 because she knew she was being triggered. So let's tune back to your best ever boss. To what extent did she or he demonstrate awareness of their mood and emotions? So please don't just spectate, write something down. So between 1 and 5, 5 total awareness, knew exactly when they were losing the head. 1 absolutely oblivious. So give them a score. Now let me give you the last 5 behaviors. We won't need examples of each. To what extent did that person make you feel appreciated? So again, just write down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 is they made everybody feel appreciated all the time. 1 is they made nobody feel appreciated ever. To what extent were they open and honest about mistakes? It's very easy for me to be open and honest about your mistakes, but about my mistakes, that's hard. It's hard to say, I screwed up, I dropped the ball. To what extent did the best boss you ever worked for, to what extent were they open and honest about mistakes? 5, totally. 1, never. 3, so-so. So, makes ethical decisions. Now, ethical decision in my mind is doing the right thing even when it might screw you up. So, doing the honest thing, the ethical thing, the moral thing, doing what is the ethically, honestly correct thing, regardless of the outcome and regardless of the impact it might have upon them. So 5 is scrupulously honest, straight, and ethical, always made the right, ethical, honest decision. 1, always made the easiest decision. So demonstrated that less than others. So give them a score. 5 high, 1 low. Manages their emotions effectively in difficult situations. When MJ left the room, first thing she did was she demonstrated awareness of her own emotions. But the second thing is she managed them really well. Somebody who manages their emotions really well is the sort of person who, when things go wrong and they either get upset or they get sad or they get angry, they take a breath and they say, okay, what can we do about this? You know that you're working for somebody who scores a 1 on this when the first thing in the morning, or the first thing you do in the morning when you go into the office, is you whisper into your colleague's ear, tell me, what sort of mood is he in? What sort of form is he in? So a 1 is, they're like a firework. Anything goes wrong, boom, they go wrong with it. 5, Zen master, cool, chilled, collected. They manage their emotions. So give that best boss a score. 5 high, 1 low. And then finally, recognizes others' hard work and achievements. And, recognizing it, the gold standard, of course, is catching somebody doing something right and then calling it out in front of their colleagues. But just giving recognition of any kind, to what extent did this best boss do that? So a 5 is high and a 1 is low. So give them a score and then add up those scores. Now, you should have a score that runs between 6 and 30, or I've done something wrong. So let me just get my attendee list up here, because I'm going to ask you to put your hand up in a moment. 1 second, where am I going to? There we go. So let me ask you, and you can do this by a show of hands, do you know anybody in your life who, when they walk into the room, they suck the positivity, they suck the energy, they suck the feel good out of the room? Anybody know anybody like that? Yeah, the hands are boom, 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 boom. Absolutely. An old boss of mine used to call them psychic vampires. A man called Jim Serbasco, who sadly passed away. And he said, people walk around with this umbilical sticking out of their bellies, he said, and they're looking to plug into people like you and I, and they suck all the positivity out of them. And they don't become any more positive, but they feel a little bit happier because you're a little bit more negative. So we all know people like that. Let me ask you the other side of the coin. Do you know anybody who, when they walk into the room, they raise the temperature positively? So the room smiles a little bit, and it's just a better place to be because of there. Give me a shot. Yeah, again. Now, here's the bottom line. We all know people like that. And when I said that to you, I know in your mind, you saw 2 faces. You saw 2 specific, maybe more, people. The reality is, the way we show up, that is, the way we behave, determines the way people feel. It really is as simple as that. The way we choose, and it is a choice, to show up, the behavior we choose to deploy with people determines how we make them feel. And I'll show you why that's important now in a moment. But first, let me ask you to do this. Please just take 15 seconds and write down 3 words, the first ones that come into your mind, as to how did your best boss make you feel. So just write it down, the first 3 words that come into your mind. Did they make you feel depressed, negative, and sad? Did they make you feel positive, upbeat, engaged? Whatever words come into your mind, just write down the first 3. And I'll give you a few seconds to do that. And please write them down. This is really important just to tune back into it. And I'm going for 15 seconds. Okay. Now, so one final question about your best boss ever. You may or may not have heard discretionary effort as an expression. Most of you will have heard of the concept of employee engagement. And an engaged employee is somebody who comes to work and they want to give their best for a whole variety of reasons. They turn up in a way that feel motivated to give the very best they can on their job, to work their tails off. And the reality is, the research says engaged employees contribute to more productivity, profitability, earnings per share, lower, what's the word I'm looking for? Higher retention rates, and so on and so forth. So what we measure as that extra effort that people who are engaged give is what we call discretionary effort, or it's going the extra mile. Now, I don't want you to think how hard did your boss, or how hard did you work, okay, for this boss? Because the reality is how hard you work is dependent on a lot of factors. But what I do want you to tell me, on a scale that runs from 1 to 10, to what extent did that boss make you want to do the best you could? 1, 2, 3 is I did what I did and I worked as hard as I did because that's me, or for my own reasons. They had no impact. 8, 9, 10 is I would have run through a brick wall for that person. You know it's an 8, 9, 10 if this is the sort of person where you say, you know, when I worked for her, I was able to do things I didn't know I was capable of. So give them a score. 8, 9, 10, they made me want to do my very best. 1, 2, 3, they had no impact whatsoever. Okay, so now we're going to repeat that exercise and we're going to go to the dark side. So I'm going to ask you to think of the worst ever boss you have. And even though it seems, what I'm going to ask you to do is write down the name. Writing down the name just makes them more real. I know that their name just came into, or the face just came into your mind, but write down the name just so it tunes you back into who they are. Now, we're going to do the same exercise again and going to rate this worst ever boss. So tell me, 5 is high and 1 is low. Remember what MJ did. When she was triggered, she left the room. To what extent did this person demonstrate awareness of their mood and emotions? 5 is high, 1 is low, 3 is in the middle. So give them a score now. To what extent do they make other people feel appreciated? That could be as simple as, good morning, how are you? It's nice to see you. You're looking well today. Please, thank you. To what extent do they make others feel appreciated? 5 is high, 1 is low. Give them a score now. Please write it down. Is open and honest about mistakes. At the high end of the 5 end is they were always open and honest, and if they dropped the ball, they said it was me, mea culpa, I dropped the ball, I screwed up. 1 is, who can I blame? 4, did the right moral and ethical thing. Always made the straight decision. Were ethically reliable. 5 is high, 1 is slippery and would go the easiest way. 5, manage their emotions effectively in difficult situations. So again, as I say, if this was a person who didn't manage their emotions effectively in difficult situations, it meant when things went wrong, when they were beset by difficult situations, they became immediately angry, sad, out of control, depressed, whatever it happens to be. So 5 is Zen master. What can we do? I know things have gone wrong. What can we do? 1 is the sky is falling. And then finally, to what extent does this person recognize others' hard work and achievements? 5 is everybody's all the time. 1 is nobody's ever. So again, add up the scores, and very frequently, and I'm not watching the question lines, but very frequently people say when they're working through this, can I give a negative score? And if you feel that strongly, go right ahead. But add it up and you should have between 6 and 30 unless you decided to give a negative score somewhere. Now, again, and this is an important part of this, just to make the point I want to make so that you're tuned into what we're doing on this program. How did you feel around this person? Let's say it was Sunday night and you were thinking of going into work for this person on Monday morning. You're in the car, you're in the train commuting to work. What are the 3 words that come into your mind that describe how they made you feel? What was it like to be around them? How did you feel? So I'm going to give you 15 seconds, and please make a point of writing them down, because I am going to ask you to share some of them anonymously in a couple of moments. So I'm going quiet for 15 seconds. Okay. And finally, to what extent did this person make you want to do your best? Not how hard did you work, because I know most people work as hard as they possibly can in a given situation. To what extent did this person get the best out of you? 1, 2, 3, I did what I did for my own reasons. 8, 9, 10, they made me want to give my best. So give them a score. Okay, so let me get up the chat up here. Now, here's your part. I'm going to ask you to tell me first, I'm going to ask you to feedback in the chat some of the answers to some of these questions. So tell me, what first off was the score that you gave for the best boss? Give me some of the scores, just pop it into the chat. So I got a 25, I got a 22, I got a 27, I got a 24, I got a 16. Okay, let me stop you there for a second and ask you, anybody lower than 16? Anyone lower than 16, just pop it in. Okay, and anything, I was going to say anything higher than 30. There's a 30 in there as well. So we can't go higher than 30. So the range in general, and this is what happens most of the times we do this exercise. Doesn't matter where you do it in the world, who you do it with. The scores in general tend to be north of 20. Very often they're north of 25. So they're somewhere up in the top level. And occasionally, and I see somebody gave a 16, occasionally you'll get it down as low as 16 and sometimes even lower for a whole variety of reasons. It might be that the best boss that somebody ever had just wasn't that great, or that they were okay. Okay. So, but you can see, first thing I want you to notice is the scores. We have a range that's running from, let's say from 16 up to 30. But if I took out 16, we're running from 23 up to 30. Now let me ask you about the dark side. What score did you have for the worst boss? Okay, 9, 14, 8, 6, 2, 10. Okay, the highest I think I have so far is 15. Okay, anybody lower than 2? Okay, I'm not seeing anything lower than 2 coming up on it so far. Anything higher than 15? And even if you put it in already, just pop it back in again because they're zooming past me here. Okay, so a 16. Good. Okay, so what we got there, we've got a couple of 16s. So what we got there is, again, a fairly typical set of results. The majority of the results are coming out as single digits. Okay, so first off, there's already a fairly substantial difference between the first group and the second group. Most of them are coming out in single digits, and that's the usual response we get when we do it globally. And then we have it creeping up after that, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16. And you're lucky if the best or the worst boss you ever had scored a 16. It means he or she was doing something really, they were doing a lot of things pretty well, and some things not so well. Okay, but here's what I do, and I'm not a mathematical person, but if I was to add together all of the numbers from the best boss and get an average, I believe I'd come out around 24, 25. If I was to add these numbers together, I believe I'd come out around probably somewhere between, I'm guessing, somewhere between 8 and 11. I'm not a mathematical head. Bottom line is, there's a very big and observable difference between the way your best boss behaved and your worst boss behaved. And that's an important point. And it's an important point for the next reason. And I'll make the connection now. Tell me, what words did you write down for the way your best boss made you feel? Confident, appreciated. Wow, I'm not going to be able to keep up with this. Positive, engaged, smiling, empowered, excited, respected, able, relaxed, attentive, happy, encouraged. I think you can see a trend coming up here. And I think you can all see those words going by. So, I think it's fair to say that's the way we would like to think we make other people feel. Because, isn't it nice to think that you might make people feel appreciated, free, optimistic? Thank you, Philip. Hardworking, empowered, happy, confident, inspired, and so on and so forth. What about Darth Vader? What about the other side of things? What words did you use for that? Disengaged, negative, worried, depressed, holy God, dread, frustrated, low self-esteem, scared, depressed, anxious, frustrated, useless, rebellious, stressful, not worthy, tired. Do you see this? Are you hearing this, the trend that's coming through in that feedback? Oh, it's months and months ago now, but somebody on one of these sessions said, like killing her or me. And that's, whoa, that's a terrible thing. But here's the point. The way that the first person showed up made you feel positive, confident, upbeat, inspired. The way that the second person showed up made you feel anxious, selfish, disrespectful, Rennie says nothing in capitals. They made me feel nothing. Stressed, bullied, angry. What can I do to avoid? I'm nervous, uncomfortable, and so on and so forth. So all of those things. Here's the thing I want you to take away. The way people show up determines the way you feel. The way you show up determines the way other people feel. And it's observable. You were able to measure, you were able to rate the way the best boss turned up, and is predictive of them making you feel all those positive emotions. And you were able to observe directly and watch how the second boss, the worst one, showed up. And again, that predicted how you would feel. Final one. What were the numbers you gave for the best boss in terms of the extent that they made you want to give the best? So I got a 9, I got a 10, I got a 5, I got a 10 plus, I got an 8, a 9. Again, a trend. Okay, you hear it all, 9s, 10s, etc. And I would imagine many of you would subscribe to the idea that this person, for working for this person, I was able to do things I didn't think I was capable of. What about this other person? How about the best boss? What sort of? 1, smiling. 1, 4, 2, 4, 0. There was no 0. There you go. 1, 2. Here's my 2 now. 1, Justine. 1. And so you hear it. So here's the connection I want to make. We're using the example of your boss. But the way that person showed up directly determined the way you feel. And the way they show up is just the way they behave. And the way they behave is a choice. You and I have a choice every day in the way we show up. Now, we can say that we don't because we're on autopilot, and many of us are. We behave the way we are because we've learned to behave that way over time. And I tend to believe that these worst bosses didn't decide that they were going to turn up and make you feel negative and depressed and down and anxious and nothing and so on and so forth, but that they had learned how to be that way over a period of time. And it didn't seem, they just weren't aware of it. Nobody had ever fed it back to them. But the impact was that they dramatically turned you on. With the top boss or the best boss turned you on, the worst boss turned you off. Maya Angelou nailed it. She said, people will never forget how you made them feel. Now, is there any place where the way you make people feel is more important than the sales role? I mean, it's really important for leaders. It's really important that we motivate our people and we make them feel good and we engage them. But seriously, is there any role where engaging people is more the living definition of the role? Salespeople are required to engage their prospects and their clients. So what I want you to see first off is that emotional intelligence is really observable through demonstrative behaviors. You've just done it for your top boss, your worst boss, and your best boss. And the process of what we will call emotional intelligence is making intelligent responses to negative emotions and using specific skills to generate positive emotions in others. So that's the critical thing that we want to get to in this session and in these 4 sessions. What you've just done is you've just used the model that is behind the assessment that we've offered you the opportunity to take, the Genos model, to assess those 2 bosses. Now, in the assessment that you're taking, you will, on each of 7 scales, and we don't have time to go into every one of them, self-awareness. On each of the 7 scales, there are the 6 scales, there are 7 items, 7 behaviors that measure the extent to which a person, for example, is self-aware, is aware of their mood and emotions and the way it's affecting the decisions they make and the things that they say and the way that they show up. All you used from each of these scales was 1 item. We just got you to look at 1 behavior, and you were able to very clearly separate your best boss from your worst boss. So when we looked at awareness of others, which is really empathy, the extent to which you're tuned into others and understand the extent to which their mood and emotions are affecting the way they feel and the way they show up. And we use that information to make them feel appreciated. That's awareness of others. Authenticity, the extent to which you're seen as being honest and trustworthy. Emotional reasoning, the extent to which you use that information about the way you and other people are reacting to things emotionally to make better decisions. Self-management, the extent to which you manage the stress of difficult emotions. And you can see we measured that just by looking at 1 item. Manages their emotions effectively in difficult situations. And then finally, inspiring performance, recognizing others' hard work and achievements. There are 42 behaviors in the model that you're completing in your assessment. We only use 6 of them. And even with 6 of them, we're able to separate the best from the rest, your best boss from your worst boss. Imagine when you look at those 42 questions, imagine the picture it gives you, or it's going to give you, of the way people see you showing up. Because most of us don't live in black or white worlds. We're not either good or bad. We're somewhere in between. Some of the things we do are great and they turn people on. Some of them are not so great and they turn people off. And the way we show up, the research suggests, every book that you read on it, everything says people buy from people, people buy from relationships. And here, Gallup said that customer satisfaction and future recommendations are based on an emotional connection with the salesperson. So let's have a look at what's at stake, because before we talk about the work you have to do in the next couple of weeks if you want to get the best out of this, let's look at just what's involved. Here's a study that we did with Sanofi Aventis. And we took, I think it was about 80 salespeople over a 1-year study. They were all doing pretty much the same job, selling pretty much the same quota, selling pretty much the same products into very, very similar markets. We split them in half and we did a formal research study. Half of them got no intervention. Half of them were measured using the same assessments you were going through and got some training in emotional intelligence, the sort of thing we're going to cover in the next few weeks. After 9 months, look at the difference. The people who were trained in EI were up by an average of 12% in sales. Remember that missing puzzle piece? You can have the best process understanding in the world, but if you show up in a way that makes people feel the way your worst boss made you feel, you turn them off. And there are lots of studies like that. You see that Sanofi Aventis, L'Oreal, national insurance company in the United States, published in Goldman's book, 90% of top performers score high in EI, and EI is twice as important in helping people achieve their personal and professional goals. That's what's at stake here. But besides that, the World Economic Forum is saying one of the critical skills for success moving forward is the ability to work with people. In other words, emotional intelligence. Remember the Derinator, the Terminator picture I had at the beginning? That was just a reference to this. We live in a very interesting age right now. Emotional or artificial intelligence is starting to take over more and more roles, and more people are being displaced from their jobs. Well, guess what the research says? It says that as we move into that artificial intelligence age, the ability to persuade, understand people, and empathize with them are going to be the most important abilities. They've always been the most important for salespeople, but even more moving forward, they're going to be important. So there's the case for it. Now, let me give you a little bit of the basic neuroscience of emotional intelligence, because I'm just changing pace a little bit. I'm setting up for the next couple of sessions because I want you to understand what's going on in your mind with this best boss and worst boss. And let me first off show you a little piece of video. There's no sound on this video. I don't want you to be listening and thinking you're losing any sound. This is the gentleman here. He's working on his motorcycle. This was taken in one of those closed circuit television things. So he's working on his motorcycle, and up in the corner here are his children. And watch as the children walk into the scene and watch what happens. And I'll unpack it for you in a few moments. Kids are walking across. Something has attracted his attention. Watch his head go up. Suddenly he's up and running. He's got the kids in his arms, and just as he pulls them out of the way, watch this in slow motion, just as he grabs a hold of them, a car barrels in at high speed. It barely misses the man's foot, okay? So let me just show you that. Again, I'm just going to unpack it with a couple of slides. Let me go down. So here he was working a cycle. This is the top of his head. This is the seat of the cycle. And here are his kids up here. Now, notice the timeline down there, 6 seconds, okay? Now, at the 8 seconds mark, you see his head. Let me just go back there. Watch his head move. Something has kind of attracted his attention. He heard a noise or something. And suddenly, just 2 seconds later, he's up on his feet, he's turned around, and he's moving towards the kids. This is the kids up the top here. This is him running. There, just 2 seconds later, he's scooping up the kids into his arms. Notice it's at 12 seconds. And literally a split second later, because we're still at 12 seconds, it is a split second. He has a hold of the kids and he's diving out. That's his spot. This blue thing coming in here is the car. The car shoots by and he barely saves the kids. Now, here's the question. How did he manage to think that quickly? How did he manage to think, oh, look, there's a car coming. I better get over there, grab the kids and get out of there. And the reality is he wasn't thinking. He was responding. An ancient part of his brain, the emotional brain, was responding. Now, this is something we're going to dive into in much more detail in the next couple of weeks. But for now, I want to introduce you to a player that you may have heard about. There's been a lot of talk about it over the last few years, and that's the amygdala. It's at the core of something called the emotional brain. It's a very ancient part of our brain, and it is concerned with nothing more than helping us to deal with threats and with survival. So when that man heard the sound of the car coming, he didn't stop to think, because thinking takes too much time. He worked on a conditioned response when the alarm center, the amygdala, triggered his brain, and he was up on his feet, scooping the kids out of the way before he even consciously knew what he was doing. Otherwise, the kids would be dead. He was running on autopilot. You run on autopilot, I run on autopilot. If I was to go, for example, I make that noise right now, and with apologies to those people whom I really terribly startled. Do you notice the way the hair stood up on the back of your neck and you kind of jumped a little bit and you were ready to either pound the life out of me or run away? That was your amygdala responding. You just responded on autopilot. And that is running all the time. We're not going to talk about it now, but it triggers one of two main responses. Either fight back, I'm sure you're ready to beat the living daylights out of me for frightening you like that, or run away. In this case, this guy did a combination of both. He was up on his feet, ran, grabbed his kids, dived out of the way. Okay. So here's what happens with everything that is processed through your brain, everything that's said to you, every expression you see on somebody's face, it is read by your emotional brain and it's given a label. It's either good for you or it's bad for you. It's either a reward or it's a threat. You can eat it or it'll eat you. So every single thing that happens to you, everything that people say to you is processed by the emotional brain, and it's either marked as being a threat or a reward situation. Now, only at that stage, when it's processed by the emotional brain, is it passed on at a slightly slower rate to your thinking brain. So every single experience you have is valenced or weighted by your emotional response to it. Every single thing you experience in your life is affected by emotions. Your worst boss put you in this danger or threat form. That's why you ended up feeling anxious and sad and depressed and angry and down and nothing and so on and so forth, because you were continually being threatened and your unconscious brain was responding to that. And the long-term response of, or the long-term impact of that is to give you deep concern, worry, frustration, stress, the sort of words you mentioned. The best boss tended to trigger you more of the time into a reward state by the way they behaved. The behaviors they chose made all the difference in the world. And your experience of working with that person was that one of being satisfied, meaningful, valued, useful. Think of the words that you used. So the way that we show up, everything we say, the way we behave affects all of the people around us, affects their feelings and their emotions, affects the decisions they make, and it affects the extent to which they engage. And for salespeople, this is critically important. Let's just look at that in a sales situation. If your brain is wired all of the time to minimize threats and maximize rewards, if that's the organizing principle of the brain, what does it mean in a sales situation? Here's something the salespeople on the call will recognize. In fact, you recognize it if you've ever had to sell somebody on an idea or a concept or sell them in an actual sales situation. Let's imagine here's my sales guy here on the left-hand side, and those two guys are pretty engaged. They're pretty much enjoying it. And sitting off to one side is this guy who we're going to call Mike, with apologies to the Mikes who are on the call here. And it's clear that he is not exactly engaged with the conversation. He's looking bored. Now, if you're a salesperson in that situation, you're not stupid. You know this is going on. You see that going on, and that is triggering your emotional brain. And you're either going to fight or flight. Here's what it looks like when you're fighting. First off, you tend to talk faster and louder. Secondly, it can become overly defensive or even pushy. So become a little bit more aggressive. Obviously, you're not up and across the chair and pounding the hell out of the person. You can lean in aggressively, so it's sort of getting into their face. Tone can become short and sharp, or sarcastic and caustic. So, hey, Mike asks, why are you more expensive? Well, do you want a Mercedes or do you want a Fiesta? So it becomes sarcastic, it becomes snotty, it becomes snitty, and so on and so forth. And under that pressure, under that simple pressure, which is just an emotional pressure, which logically shouldn't affect you, your logical sales process and the way you've learned to be a wonderful salesperson, engaging person falls away. The flight responses are a little bit different, but they're no less negative. So in a situation where Mike is sitting there and he's paying no attention, first thing is, hey, how dare he? I've put so much effort into the sales presentation. How dare he do that? He speaks more quietly and tentatively. So, oh God, he doesn't like what I'm saying. I'll just tone it back a little bit. Or ignores Mike, aggressively just turns away and ignores him. I can't see you. I can't see you. Or maybe even discounts too quickly. I mean, a flight response is, Mike, if Mike says, you think you could do this for 20%? Yes. Oh, yeah. No problem. I think we can make this happen. Wow. I got him on board. Thank God. Or they may agree to pointless proposals. And every salesperson on this call knows what I mean. When they're under that pressure and somebody says, hey, can you send me a proposal? Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks very much. And in their mind, it's thinking, get me out of here. Okay. So we are triggered all day, every day by everything that's said to us and everything that happens to us. And once again, under emotional pressure, the highly trained logical sales process falls away. But there are two parties to a call. I'll move past that. There are two parties to the call. One is the salesperson, but you can also trigger your prospect. Your prospect is also an emotional being. And they get triggered by the way you sell, because we all know when we're being sold to and we go on the defensive. When we detect somebody trying to sell to us, we tend to either push back against them or we fly away. So the typical sort of things that we recognize, somebody starts asking us classic sales questions. Hey, are you thinking of making a change? Are you having problems with your current vendor? If I was able to deal with this issue, would you be ready to take the next step? What's your budget on this project? My God, have you ever asked that? In some cultures, you ask people what's their budget for the project, and you can really, really upset and offend them. In others, it's not as big an issue. But here's the point. Some of the questions that we learn to ask in the sales process actually trigger that emotional part of the brain. They put people into this irrational fight or flight mode. And from that point forward, they are no longer logically listening to us. Okay. So not only do we need as salespeople to manage the way we show up, but we need to manage the way others, or the way we deal with others who are being triggered. So in sales situations, EI is the skill of working with your emotional brain and that of your prospect. It's recognizing the emotions of yourself and your prospects in the moment, during a sales meeting, during a sales call, identifying what's going on with you or them, and then responding appropriately. So it's about being tuned in to, how am I responding to this? What effect is this having on the things I'm saying and the way I'm responding? What effect is it having on my prospect or my client and the way that I'm responding? And then using that information to respond to the trigger or the event in order to achieve the best outcome. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the difference between the great salespeople and the rest is that they also have the process stuff under control. They have to. But they also understand how to show up. And whether they've consciously learned the skill or they have learned it intuitively, they understand how to manage the emotions in a situation. So earlier we looked at the model. Here's the impact of the model. This is different to what you looked at earlier. When you're selling as an emotionally intelligent salesperson, you're more self-aware, okay? Which means that you know when you've been triggered and by what. You're more aware of the other party. You know when they have been triggered. You tend to stay more honest and genuine and straightforward in a situation, even when you're under pressure. You make the right decision and you understand the emotion. So you know is this a time to look for somebody to buy from me, or is this time to back off? You manage the stress. When you're in that situation with Mike, it's tough, it's stressful, but you have to have skills to be able to manage that impact so you continue to operate like that best boss, that you continue to operate almost zen-like under the pressure of difficult emotions. And then finally, that you have a positive impact on people. You establish that emotional connection with people. So over the next 4 weeks, we're going to learn some skills to do exactly that. This is why emotionally intelligent salespeople sell more. So imagine if you as a salesperson or your salespeople, the ones you manage, have all of the technical skills they have right now, but they also have this skill to be able to show up in a way that is very, very respectful of the way others are feeling and they are feeling, and manage the emotions in any given situation. And all of the research says it works. 63% of the behaviors, according to Harvard Business Review, actually drove down sales performance. In a study of about 800 salespeople, CEB said that customer loyalty came from the behaviors salespeople use when selling. So you would think, great, all I need to do is start assimilating all of the 42 behaviors that you have in that model. And the answer couldn't be more wrong for two reasons. One is you already do a lot of these things. You already have those as part of your skill set. But some of them you don't. And the challenge is you don't know which ones you have and which ones you don't. None of us do, because we're running on autopilot. We're running the way we've always run, the way we've learned to show up. So if you give everybody the same sales training and the same focus and the same behaviors to focus upon, well, then you're going to get different results, because some people already have those behaviors in buckets and some don't. So the other challenge is 42 skills. The research says that you have to practice a new skill at least 144 times for it to land in your long-term memory. So what we need to do is help you identify what's the 1 or 2 areas that are really important to you. And that's why we offered you the assessment. The assessment normally costs a couple of $100. You get an opportunity to see yourself through the eyes of other people, so you can identify, as you work through this program, what are the 1 or 2 areas that you really want to focus upon. So here's what we're doing. We're not trying to help you do something differently, because you already know your sales process. I'm not here to train you on how to prospect. I'm here to train you on how to show up as an emotionally intelligent salesperson. So first thing is, I need to understand, how do I show up? And that's why we get you to get input from some of your clients in the assessment that they've set up for you. You'll get some feedback. It'll tell you, here's what you need to do well, and here's what's not working for you. And that's what we're going to cover in the next session. Then you get into understanding, what behavior do I need to change, and how do I go about practicing that? And then, as it says on the shampoo bottle, it's rinse and repeat. So the first step in this program is figuring out, where am I right now? It's like when you walk into the shopping center and there's that map that says you are here. In the next session, we're going to feedback your report, which hopefully you'll have in your hand at that stage. It's down to you. If you do your bit, we'll do ours. And we'll give you that start point. Now, we call this mindful and emotional intelligence salesperson session. And let me make the connection, and we make it more next week. Self-awareness is the first thing that you saw on that Genos model, and it's the gateway to emotional intelligence. Well, you're going to see next week that mindfulness is the practical gateway into self-awareness. So we're going to give you a practical set of skills that, if you start applying them right now, will impact the way you show up and impact your sales results. This is a practical program. We expect you to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty. So each week we're going to give you some things to do. And so we're going to ask you to work with us and do something in between the sessions. These are not academic sessions. Now, many of you have been selling for many years. Some of you have been involved in mindfulness for many years. Some of you have been involved in emotional intelligence for many years. Some of the ideas we present in here will be different. Keep what the Zen people call a beginner's mind. All I'm saying is, open your mind, Listen to what we share with you and then make a decision. Will this work for me? And if you do that, I guarantee you'll get something out of these sessions. Now, we are, with apologies, we're about 4 minutes behind, but I do want to finish just with a really quick practice, which I'd like you to continue during the week. So let me just ask you just for a second, and we get through this very quickly. Just sit up in your chair and not stiff and upright, but just sit up in a sort of attentive position and put your feet on the floor. And just for a few moments, allow your attention to drop down to notice the sensations of your feet on the floor. I don't mean imagine your feet, I don't mean visualize them. Just see if you can allow yourself to just drop down and pay attention to any sensations that tell you your feet are on the floor. You might feel the sensation of your foot in contact with your sock or stocking. Inside your shoe in contact with the ground, you may feel pulsing, hot, cold. Doesn't matter what it is, just notice it. Just allow your entire attention just to drop down and see if you can notice that. And then as you do that, let me invite you just to start to breathe a little bit more slowly. And as you breathe in, see if you can time this next breath so that you're counting 7. So just time it so whatever length that breath is, that it makes a count to 7. And then let it out a little bit more slowly, say for a count of 11, or whatever is comfortable for you. So you'll be breathing in, so and then out. And then in. Just take a few breaths like that, and don't worry about the counting too much. Just see if you can make the out breath a little bit longer than the in breath. I'm going to stop for a minute and just let you take a few of those breaths. So during the week or following the session, we'll send you a recording. We'll send you a copy of notes from the session. And we'll send you a guidance on this practice. I'm going to ask you to use it. I'll tell you how now in a moment. I'm going to ask you to use it between now and the next time we see you. And I promise you, if you do, you're learning a skill that's going to be really useful in any situation where you have to deal with people and remain calm and connected. So where are we going next few weeks? Well, next time we're going to look at, in general, over the next 4 weeks, we're going to look at how do you build your focus and attention? How do you increase good, solid connection with others? And how do you handle stress and build the resilience to deal with those no's that inevitably come when you're a salesperson? The first week, which is the next session, we're going to look at self-awareness. That is basically where you start to become emotionally intelligent. So we'll walk you through your report. I'll get Aoife to talk about that momentarily, so that you can identify your strengths and challenges, and so that you can learn to notice your reactions when you're in heated situations. And then in subsequent sessions, we're going to look at how you build awareness of others to build connection, and then how you deal with disruptive emotions. When somebody says no, or somebody says, you do know we're looking at 4 other suppliers, don't you? How do you manage the inevitable threat that your emotional system feels? So I hate the word homework, but I like this particular image. So here's what I'm asking you to do. And don't worry, we're going to send you all the materials to support it. First thing, please get the raters, or the people who are going to feedback on you, nominated, and complete your own input. Because in the next session, having your report in hand is going to be really, really important. We're going to send you a recording to help you practice the seat and feet exercise. And we'll suggest to you that you create a trigger for this. So the trigger might be, every time I'm starting a new task, I'm going to stop, I'm going to bring attention to my feet on the floor, and take 6 breaths like we did there. And it might be, we'll talk about this in the recording, every time you start a new task, or every time you sit down to a table or a chair or your desk, or anytime you're about to start a meeting or a call. But the idea is just to start introducing this practice, which takes about a minute or a minute and a half in throughout your day. But we'll give you more guidance on that. And then I would suggest that you check out the Mindfulness and Emotional Intelligence group on LinkedIn. We'll give you information about that in a moment. And don't forget, you've seen how responsive AFA is. I've been traveling a lot, so you haven't seen much response from me. AFA and myself are there to support you with any questions you have during this session. We have, at the moment, about 570 people in this group, and we have more of our attendees on this program joining all the time. So feel free to drop in there. We do a lot of conversation, discussion, articles on this and other topics related to mindfulness and emotional intelligence. So with that said, let me bring Aoife back on because I just want to deal first off with the questions and then wrap things up before we go. Now, for those of you, I apologize. I've mistimed this completely. We're 10 minutes over. So sorry. If you're under time pressure, please go ahead right now and you can catch up with the recording. But we keep the recording running so that we get those questions, Aoife. So,
sure. Thanks, Deiric. That was great. So far, nothing overarching. So, folks, if you have questions, feel free to type them in there now. Deiric, a few folks said, thanks for setting the scene clearly. I look forward to the rest of the sessions.
Great.
As usual, a great presentation, great knowledge for sales application. I'm getting in the groove. We'll hold the questions for future sessions. We're busy listening. No questions right now. So again, as normal, I guess you were just so clear there.
Oh, God, you're so good. Thank you. Thank you, folks. Thank you for saying all those nice things. Oh, one other thing I forgot to say. You saw me gallop like a horse through that. I realized when we were preparing the session this week, 60 minutes is not going to work. So we're going to change the future sessions to 90 minutes with apologies, but it's the only way we can give you really good value for the sessions. So we're going to change the invitation. We're going to change the thing on the on Zoom. If you've already booked in for the next sessions, don't worry. You just turn up as usual. You've already got your connection. And let me see. I'm going to reshare the screen just to make sure that I'm absolutely on track. And yeah, we've done the questions. So look, folks, thank you very much. Really appreciate you taking the time. Looking forward to seeing you. Do I have the date? No, I don't, but it's in April. What is April 10? Anyway, you know what the date is. I don't off the top of my head know what the date is. It'll be, as I say, it'll be 90 minutes. Thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time out and looking forward to working with you over the next several weeks.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Be good. Bye-bye.